why they are still demonstrating to have their issues addressed. In your opinion, where we failed and how you will fix it, and most importantly, do we as a nation have a willpower to do that?
Oh, good question, and and I think it's a very critical one. You know what? The issue is that it's not a simple thing to do, and I think who are you going to negotiate with? You know, who is really within the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people? Who is going to be their voice? And I think in the past, the divide and conquer was the kind of choice tactic. And so now I think that the First Nations and Métis and Inuit people are realizing that they need to come together as a more solid voice. And I think Canadians have to understand that we have managed to delay this. Actually, some of the actions of our government actually made things worse. And so we have to accept responsibility for actions of our government in the past and say that we're not going to allow that to happen anymore.
So are you saying that right now we have a Conservative Party, of course, but over the last many years there have been Liberals and Conservative. So are you saying that leadership somehow, I will not use the word failed, but somehow they have not been honest in dealing with the issues related with the First Nations?
I think we haven't always gone and done all the tough work. And let's make no mistake about this. This is going to be tough work. I know that Paul Martin is something that he felt very, very strongly at. He worked very hard with our First Nations people to come with the first step. But the Kelowna Accord was only the first step. But it was a recognition that something needed to get done. But then, of course, when the Liberal Party lost government, the Kelowna Accord didn't go anywhere. But so we did the Liberal Party make mistakes in the history? Oh, sure it did. No doubt about that at all. But I think that they were on our way to acknowledging those mistakes and trying to change things.
All right, let's move on to the next issue, which is of international relationship diplomatic issues. And as I said in your introduction, you have studied negotiation and mediation. We know that there are so many conflicts around the world, and our troops are, for example, in Mali, in Afghanistan, and they were in Libya and so many other places. What role, in your opinion, Canada can and should play to resolve these issues through negotiation and diplomatically, and why we have failed in the past?
I think this is Canada's greatest calling, that we understand that this is our contribution to the world. It's not the aggressiveness, it's not the confrontation, it's the being willing to sit down at a table and actually address the issues. When I was in NATO for 4 years, the Canadians inside NATO, we were the bridge builders. When my general, who was Norwegian, had a tough issue he couldn't deal with, he called to me and said, "Karen, go make them talk. Go find out what's happening here. Why can't they make the progress?" And we could always go in because everybody was willing to listen to the Canadian. Because normally we brought common sense, we brought a sense of calm, we acknowledged everyone's contribution, and we could build that consensus. That's our forte, and that's something that we can offer the world. I mean, we need to get out there and actually do some of the preventative work, and that's something also that we are good at. So having our government kind of pull away from the United Nations and pull away from NATO is not the right way to do things. We should be investing in these kind of multilateral organizations and contributing to the world as part of a partnership. I think that's key, and I think that's an opportunity that this government has been missing.
I give you two scenarios here and see where we are heading. we have now only last week have this religious freedom office, and we are still trying to figure it out and making inquiries as to what is the exact role of this office. But let's say somehow this office is there to share some goodwill Canada has, and somehow maybe sit down and talk about the issues and have more freedom for the religious minorities in the world. Okay, one hand is this. Second, on the second side, we have issues in Middle East. For example, issue of Israel and Palestinians, and we as a government or as a country have taken a strong stand. And not really on the surface seems to be dealing with this issue head on and say this is how we can move forward peacefully on this issue. So how you see, where you see we are going as a country with respect to one hand saying let's use this office, religious freedom office, to foster goodwill. On the other hand, saying no, we are not going to sit down with X number of people or on X number of issues and not going to talk about it. So how do you think international diplomacy is playing in this sense?
Oh, what a good question, Manar. And that's exactly the problem. I mean, we are not. If you look at the Middle East, we are not trying to create that open-mindedness and that even-handedness. You know what I mean? We are taking sides.
Yes.
And we should not do that. I mean, in order to get some lasting peace in the Middle East, there's going to be requirement for some compromise. And for us to take only one side and not being willing to look at the other side, that's, to me, that's so contrary to who we are as Canadians. Sometimes you have to take a principled stand when something happens, and you have to say, well, this is wrong. But to not even be willing to have a discussion, to say, how do we move peace forward, that's wrong. So on the one hand, we have the, let's say, the conflict between the religions in the Middle East, and we're not doing anything to foster better relationships there. In fact, we're doing things that is actually going to antagonize and make it worse. And yet we set up an office for religious freedom saying that it's supposed to foster better relationships. Mm-hmm. So you can't have it both ways, you know, and it's really, to me, this is what we do and what we say are not lining up with this government. I mean, there's so many issues we can discuss about, and we have a limitation on the time as well. But one issue I want to bring out related to what we just discussed is the issue of human rights, and that's at the international level. There are religious minorities, there are ethnic minorities. The issue between, for example, the Palestinians and Israeli is not a really religious issue, but more of a political-oriented issue, although on the world stage, it seems to be that maybe somehow the religious has a role in it. So, given all these conflicts, and we, the Sikh community, being a part of the minority itself, both in Canada and throughout the world, have many issues related to our existence, I will say. So, in that respect, where you see Canada as a statesman in advocating on behalf of the minorities which are in Canada, but somehow they have issues related with the human rights at the world stage. Yeah. You know...
It's a tough one?
No, this is a good one. No, it's a good one.
Okay.
Because when I think back to my time when I joined the Canadian Forces as a woman,
yes,
as a young woman, and I was a minority, I know that I needed the protection of what the Canadian Forces chain of command. You will not be able to thrive in a situation where the playing field isn't at least somewhat leveled. And I think that's something that here in Canada we've tried to level that playing field. We've tried to make sure that people have an equality of opportunity. You know, it's not perfect, but it's part of who we are, I think, to keep on trying to make those kind of improvements.